Today, I am going to talk about Tonglen, and also we're going to be doing some Tonglen as well. That Tonglen is a very important practice. And in retrospect, I have done very little of this, or led very little of this in the past few years since COVID. So to begin with, Tonglen is a Mahayana practice. Comes from the Mahayana tradition, not the Vajrayana tradition. And on the other hand, it is a very powerful practice and helps us quickly progress along the path. To begin any Tonglen session, it's first of all important to think about motivation and to have proper motivation. Proper motivation being the motivation of bodhicitta, that you are doing this practice so that you will be able to benefit all sentient beings, either through the practice or by progressing on the path through having done the practice. So bodhicitta motivation means that you have the aspiration to travel the path and benefit all beings. And secondly, that you are willing to do what's necessary to progress along the path and be of most benefit to all sentient beings. So it's more than just, you might say, wishing. It is actually having the aspiration to do something. And one of the activities that helps us progress along the path is a Tonglen. So start out any Tonglen session, and actually really any session of practice, even sitting meditation, it's good to remind yourself of why you're doing the practice, which is to benefit all beings. Second, then it's good to briefly go over the four thoughts, the four ordinary foundations. Sometimes they're referred to as the four thoughts that turn one's mind to the Dharma. Looking at it from a different perspective, you could say the four thoughts that turn one's mind away from samsaric activity. So the four thoughts are, very briefly, how precious our human birth is, the fact that we are alive, that we have a human body, and that our human body is working relatively well. I can tell you this more and more and more. I am reminded, both by my own body and that of my friends, that as we get older, our bodies become less reliable. And that it's really important, when you think about how precious having a human birth is, that this is the one realm, the human realm, that we have a chance of coming in contact with Buddhism, practicing Buddhism, traveling the path, and eventually becoming a fully enlightened Buddha. That it is not possible in all the other realms. And on top of that, that we not only have a human body, but we have come in contact with Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, great teachers, and so forth, and are actually in a very wonderful position. I've not seen any actuarial tables, but I would say that we are not in the 1%. We're not in the 0.5%. We are probably in a 1/1000th% of the human beings in the human realm, because we have met such great teachers. We have His Holiness, the Karmapa, as our root guru, and so on and so forth, that we really are in a very, very, very special and precious position right now. The second thought is, of course, impermanence, and that is that this body of ours will not last, and that we could be reborn in a less than precious human body, a body that is not, shall we say, fully functional, where the mind is not as functional as our present mind is more disturbed, is perhaps having learning deficiencies, physical impairments, being born in a country where there is no Dharma, and so forth, that we could die at any moment, and this precious opportunity of ours is gone. And also, you could just have, shall we say, a medical event where that you are no longer able to understand the teachings, practice the teachings, or whatever, such as having a stroke yet surviving. And the third is understanding the law of karma, that when we do virtuous things, we are planting virtuous seeds that will lead to good outcomes in this life and especially future lives. And this is used to help motivate us to practice, because it is through practice that we accumulate the most virtue. And when we don't practice, we're much more likely to do things that we later come to regret, because they are planting non-virtuous seeds that will cause suffering in the future. And perhaps we're causing other people to suffer right now in the present by our actions. So it's very important to be mindful of karma and the results of our actions. And the fourth thought, of course, is that no matter what realm we are in samsara, no matter how comfortable we are in our human body at the present time, none of these places are permanent, and none of these are places that you want to hang out in when you look at things in the long run. So these four thoughts are intended to turn us away from samsaric pursuits and turn us in the direction of the Dharma, practicing the Dharma, actually doing something about our situation. And compassion and loving kindness is really the basis of the path, the Mahayana path. That compassion is considered wanting others to be free of suffering and free of the causes of suffering. And loving kindness is wanting others to have happiness and to have the causes of happiness. And the path leads to first becoming a bodhisattva, And bodhisattvas are considered the mothers of the Buddhas. So we travel the path little by little, gradually, perhaps taking the bodhisattva vows and engaging more and more in bodhisattva conduct, which is benefiting other beings, and practicing more and more so that we can continue to travel towards becoming a fully enlightened bodhisattva and then a Buddha. Here is a quote from Khenpo Karta Rinpoche. Enlightened beings have reached enlightenment by working for the benefit of all sentient beings. Sentient beings remain in samsara because they work for themselves alone. So the path starts with, the Mahayana path starts with taming our mind first through shamatha. And when you do Tonglen, it is best to begin with a shamatha session to help the mind calm down. It allows us to experience perhaps a little bit more clarity, a little bit more stability, and over time, peace and contentment. So it's really important to practice shamatha along with Tonglen. To continue more about the practice, and that is that shamatha, we put our body in a certain position. There's specific instructions on how to meditate and what position the body should be in. And it is because of the interdependence, because of our body and our mind, that we are trying to get into this position the best that we can. Now, when we are doing shamatha, and again, a good shamatha practice is really necessary to have the ability and mental stability to be able to do Tonglen, especially over time, because Tonglen is not something that you just do from time to time when you think of it or when it's on the schedule, but it's good to actually have, if you can fit it into your daily practice, a daily Tonglen practice, or at least do it a few times during the week. Now, the root of our afflictive states of mind is dualistic thinking, or a dualistic view, taking that which is not a self to be a self, and that which is not other to be an other. And it is amazing to enlightened beings when they see how we get this dualistic thinking. What would I say? It becomes so out of control that even though there is no self, we develop self-loathing. we become ashamed of who we are. When we were studying the book In Love with the World, Mingyur Rinpoche talked about how when he went off, left the monastery, got on this very this train in India, and was in the lowest, what would I say, compartment where the poorest of the people traveled, how he kept feeling ashamed of who he was. And he kept questioning that. But when we meditate and when we look within and we start acknowledging the thoughts that arise when we meditate, we find that frequently there is self-loathing, that we are ashamed of who we are, that arrogance creeps in. And underneath arrogance usually is a feeling of being ashamed of who you are. And so to counter it, we become arrogant and think that we're really better than other people, while inside we thinking that we are worse than other people. And that's how confusing our minds can get. We try to impress others. We'd have ego games of all kinds of trying to prove ourselves, prove that we have value, and on and on and on. And Tonglen works with all of this. Tonglen is a way of working with all of this and working successfully with it. That compassion and loving kindness will weaken and will ultimately uproot all of this confused kinds of thinking. When we become more aware of others and the suffering that others are having, that this helps uproot our own egotistical outlook of seeing ourselves as the most important, or at least most important most of the time. And Tonglen also will help weaken our ignorance. So it's always good to, from time to time, take a deep look at ourselves, the way we look at ourselves, the way we act when we're with other people, and so forth. And frequently, of course, we find that we don't like what we see. What's important is to see it, but instead of judging and thinking this just shows that I'm a bad person, that I'm an egotistical person, which brings you right back to square one of self-loathing and being ashamed of who you are, to saying, I would like to change this kind of behavior. I'm going to work on changing this kind of behavior, this kind of thinking. So traditionally, in Tonglen, they talk about imagining your mother in front of you sitting, and you think about all the pain and difficulties that she has had to deal with as a result of giving birth to you and taking care of you. Now, from personal experience, I find a lot of Westerners, at least, find it difficult to start there, that they don't even feel compassion and love for themselves. that there's a lot of self-loathing. And for that reason, I have written my own version of a Tonglen practice where we start working with ourselves. And some of you I have given this practice to, and some of you probably do not have it. At the end, if you just put in an email to me saying you would like a copy of it, I will send a copy of it to you. But I am going to read from it now, if I can find it. And so here is the long version. I have a shorter version of this that I call Unlocking the Heart. But the long version I call Jailbreak. And I started out with a quote from the 17th Karmapa. It's in his book, Interconnected. And this is kind of the inspiration I use with the analogy of jailbreak. Quote, I sometimes describe egocentrism as a prison in which we have shut ourselves away from everyone and everything else. Our ego makes us prisoner. Only a limited few people or pets matter to us, and only they are allowed entry into our self-made jail. Everyone else is irrelevant, as if the world outside the prison doesn't really exist. Our own egotism and self-absorption act as the wardens that keep us shut off from the rest of the world. So now here is a description of the practice that we are going to do in a couple of minutes. People who have had trauma or other painful experiences can live in a jail, a prisoner of their past. Even though they haven't experienced the actual pain for years, even decades, they are behaving as though it is still happening. It is a jail of habitual patterns, impulsive reactions, anxiety, compulsive behavior, self-loathing, suffering, and unhappiness. Yet it is familiar, normal, and therefore somewhat comfortable. Like an actual jail, there are locks keeping you from escaping. In this prison, there is an inner voice, like the warden, constantly telling the inmate how bad they are. Statements of guilt, anger towards oneself, self-loathing, anxiety. Messages like, quote, I constantly fail, or I'm not as good as others, end quote. It can get nasty with thoughts like this, quote, I am an expletive deleted idiot, or I am a terrible person, or I might as well kill myself, end quote. This is a completely workable situation. A person in this prison-like situation needs to have the desire to escape. You cannot break out otherwise. There is no release date, and no one can break in and open the lock for you. Then the warden needs to be recognized. The way out continues with learning to love yourself, not because you earned it, but just because you are a living human being. You are just as valuable as everyone else. You can learn to love yourself without having to earn it. There is a Tibetan saying, quote, "If you have a warm place in your heart for yourself, you will be comfortable wherever you go." End of quote. We can learn to nurture that warm place. Here is a simple exercise in growing that warm place. This is the key to open the lock of self-loathing. The exercise is called taking and sending, Tonglen in Tibetan. It is a practice of sending love and removing suffering. It is best to sit cross-legged on a meditation cushion on the floor, as you would when meditating. It can also be done in a chair. Visualize yourself in the future, perhaps 10 minutes into the future, sitting in front facing you. When you breathe in, imagine you are inhaling black, hot smoke coming from the visualized you in front. It carries with it your self-loathing, anger towards yourself, helplessness, powerlessness, any negative feelings you have towards yourself. This is compassion, wanting to remove your future suffering. When you exhale, imagine breathing out white light. It goes to the you in front, soaks into you, like the future you is sunbathing and soaking up the sunlight. The light carries with it contentment, satisfaction, cheerfulness, joy, delight, well-being, lightheartedness, and forgiveness, transferring it from the present you to the future you. This is love. Compassion for yourself is necessary for spiritual growth and to escape this jail. The smoke you inhale can contain any thoughts that you hold on to that cause you to suffer. You may become aware of other things causing you to suffer as you practice this exercise over time. Make a list if you like. Include the items on the list in the black smoke coming from the visualized you in front. The smoke goes into your lungs, dissolves, and disappears. The negativity and suffering does not accumulate in you. Concentrate on a few specific things in one session. The in-breath is short as you are breathing normally. When exhaling, we are preparing that warm place in our heart. Love is wanting people to be happy. And again, remember, you are a person too, worthy of love without earning it. When you have experienced serious emotional pain, it can be difficult to know and experience love free from negative emotions. Fondness, tenderness, warmth, and non-sexual intimacy are associated with love in this practice. The light you're exhaling can carry anything that makes you truly happy. When inhaling, you remove the things that cause you to suffer. Now think of the antidote and give it to the future you. The intimacy is that you allow yourself to look into the places where fear and loathing lurk. Then you can apply the remedy, love, to those places. In that warm place, you treat yourself like a loving mother treats her infant. Whatever the child does, the mother responds with tenderness, warmth, fondness, and gentleness. Now you can have the love you may have never had as a child or even an adult. You don't need to seek it in others. Just look inside to experience love. This is intended to be done regularly for 5 to 10 minutes. As you practice more, it is fine to extend the time if you like. During any one session, you can concentrate on a few things to inhale and a few others to exhale. Whatever is most needed at the time. One day it might be anger and forgiveness, another fear and fearlessness. In this way, the lock slowly opens. You begin to discover the advice the warden gives is inaccurate and does not need to be followed. Open the door and venture out into an open, spacious world. Take that warm spot in your heart with you wherever you go. And now you can be more compassionate and loving with whomever you encounter in your daily life. Compassion and love are healthy and easily passed on. So now we are going to do this particular type of Tonglen. So get comfortable, and we'll start when I hit the singing bowl. That finishes the Tonglen session. And before I open up the question and answers, I just want to remind you that 10 minutes have passed, and the you in front of you is now the you, and the you that was sitting there doing the practice is in the past and is gone. The question is now, when you do it, do you just remain there doing this with yourself, or do you progress to people that are close to you, like it is done traditionally, and then people that are more distant, and then maybe enemies? And definitely that is the way to do it. What I have found is that many of my students, the most difficult person they have to love is themselves. That they don't feel that they are worthy of it, and they have no trouble loving a dog or a cat or a partner most of the time, and so forth. But when it comes to themselves, that it's like a wall. And again, I have not worked closely with Tibetans or Chinese or other Asian groups, but with Americans, the people that come to me, I think this is really an important step. And part of this is based on my own personal experience of self-loathing and feeling that there was something fundamentally wrong with me and other people. You know, they had things that I was missing, qualities, take your pick. I'm going to add to this a little bit. It is excellent if you have time to then extend it in a session to other people as well. Traditionally, it would be your mother. If you have a difficult time with your mother, then maybe a grandmother. If you can't find a person on the face of the earth that you've ever known, that you feel really close to, and you would like to relieve their suffering, then a pet. But again, step by step, little by little, we try to expand it to a bigger and bigger group. And if we do it properly, where we're really putting our heart into it, rather than just giving it lip service, this will also cause a greater appreciation of ourselves, because we realize we have more to give than we ever thought possible. But if we're just giving it lip service, if we're not really, if we're feeling, shall we say, pity, rather than I have something worthwhile inside of me that I want to give to another person. I have something here in my heart that is valuable, and I want to give this to another being because this will cause them a reduction in suffering or increase their happiness, which is very different than saying, I want this person to be happy. I want that person to be free of suffering, but I have nothing to offer them other than this wish, or pitying them because they are suffering so much. But then you have this, instead of equal, you've got, I am above these poor, pitiful beings. And so it gets tricky. We talked the other night in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, how tricky our spiritual paths can be and how tricky our ego is. And it's the same way with Tonglen. We really have to be on top of things and get to know ourselves very, very well, and realize that we do have this love inside of us that we can give to others. And if we can give it to others, then what are we embarrassed about ourselves? Why are we loathing ourselves? Why are we angry at ourselves? The question is, could you please go over the fourth of the four ordinary foundations, or the four thoughts that turn one's mind to the Dharma? And it is the unsatisfactory state of the different realms of samsara. That it's very common in people that are Buddhist and Buddhist cultures to want to have a better rebirth, to want to be in their next birth, to be more prosperous, to be healthier, to have a nicer body, to be born in better circumstances, and so forth. And some people might even want to be born in a God realm where you live incredibly long lives and experience a lot of bliss and experience no suffering. The point being that in any of the realms of samsara, there is birth and death. There, as a result, there is a suffering of one kind or another. And no matter how prosperous you are in the human realm, you die and you leave it all behind. And it can be very painful leaving billions of dollars behind. It can be very painful leaving $100 behind. It can be very painful leaving a partner behind, a child behind, and so on and so forth. And so there is no safe place in these different realms of samsara where you can kind of hang out, relax, put it on a proverbial cruise control, maybe a driverless Tesla. But these don't exist. And so that's what the fourth thought is give up thinking that you can just find a safe place to hang out for a few years or a lifetime or two, that the end is inevitable and it's not going to be an end you like.